Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I finally wanted to give my guide on how you guys can help counter Nilah in your own games, as she is very slowly starting to become a part of the current metagame. Despite only sitting at about a 50% win rate, Nilah has had a pretty beefy ban rate and has already seen pro play despite her relative youth as a character, which makes her a potentially difficult champion to deal with, which is why I'm creating this video today. Of note, however, Nilah is a very skill-intensive champion that requires a lot of mechanical execution and game sense to get the most of, which means, as a result, she tends to be less effective in low ranks versus high ranks. As a result, you may not be seeing Nilah very often in your games if you are in the lower ranks, but if you do end up seeing Nilah, or especially if you start seeing her a lot more often, it means she may be completely out of hand, and that means that she may need to be nerfed. But in the meantime, hopefully this video gives you guys some ideas about how you can deal with her in your own games. I'm going to go through her specific abilities, give some more general advice about how to deal with her, and then go on to talk about some specific counter picks. Specifically revolving Nilah's abilities, her passive is obnoxious to say the least. That's the bonus healing and shielding, and give herself heals and shields whenever anybody else heals or shields near her. There's a lot going on with it. It's annoying, but it doesn't fundamentally make her that much harder to kill. You always can itemize grievous wounds as well if Nilah is paired with a healer or if she has a very heavy healing composition nearby. Otherwise, though, it's not that big of a deal because of the fact that Nilah is very squishy. She tends to itemize very high critical strike chance, which means that she doesn't have that much durability. Unlike a champion like Vi, who can do a lot of damage but take a lot of damage as well, Nilah is not tanky at all. So she sort of needs that extra bump of durability from the healing and shielding. It means that if she has a ton of it, right, if she's paired alongside an Aatrox or a Dr. Mundo or a Soraka or multiple of those champions all at the same time, and she just really has a ton of healing, it can be really obnoxious to deal with her because she will be healing a decent chunk off of that. But if that's not the case, she isn't going to heal a tremendous amount, and you probably don't have to worry about itemizing grievous wounds into her. Her free armor penetration passive on her Q makes her a decent choice into resist stacking tanks like Malphite or Rammus, but she also has to stack crit to benefit from it, which means it pushes her power spikes to later in the game. This means that those champions are still totally playable, and that itemizing armor early in the game still does matter, because even at 100% crit, Nilah only gets 33% armor penetration, which isn't that big of a deal. But it does mean that it takes a long time to ramp up that value, and you can really cut her damage in half by just itemizing armor and really making yourself harder for her to kill. A well-played Nilah will likely be able to outlevel you thanks to her boosted XP passive, but that said, if she misses last hits, she doesn't get the boosted XP, which means that you can deny her that extra advantage by bullying her in lane. If she's not actually killing the minions, if she's just soaking the XP from like back behind her wave, she's not actually getting any of the bonus XP, which means that she'll be at probably the same or lower level as the champions she's dealing with in lane. As a result, therefore, a lot of lane pressure can really put the corkscrews to her and make it so that she's actually not getting an advantage off of that passive in the slightest. It also means that a poorly piloted Nilah who's missing last hits is not getting bonus experience and therefore is wasting that passive in its entirety. Her Q is a pretty low cooldown. Think about it like Viego Q. So it's not a tremendous deal to dodge or not dodge. She's just going to get it back very shortly afterwards. But if she misses it even once, it can prevent her from having her boosted range for a moderate duration, which potentially forces her to miss out on damage or force her to step up even further to auto attack, which is a pretty risky proposition for a squishy crit builder. As a result, if you think she's likely to be trying to Q the entire wave to shove it out, make sure you're not standing in the AoE. If you think she's going to try and Q you, just keep your dancing shoes on and try to get back out of range. Or if you're in a duel with her, this is an important cooldown to try and dodge, because if you can, not only are you going to remove her steroid that she gets from her Q, but her range is also going to be a lot weaker, which means she really has to be within melee range to do any damage at all, and that's a tough ask for Nilah, especially if she's already used both of her dashes. Her Q-boosted area, or auto attacks also have a small area of effect, which means that you absolutely should not stack into a Nilah if you can help it, because it just lets her benefit from more damage. If she's hitting your entire team, she's doing a ton of damage, she's getting a ton of healing, and it's just going to be a lot for your team to deal with, so try to spread out, especially if you're trying to deal with Nilah. This sort of makes sense in general with Nilah compositions, because she kind of needs a big AoE wombo combo teamfight to get a lot of value off of. So in general, you're already going to want to be staying apart, but it's worth mentioning here as well. Nilah's W is basically Jack's W, but without the stun or damage at the end, which means that the counterplay is roughly the same. Don't overcommit to a kill if Nilah hasn't popped it yet, because the damage reduction and auto-attack dodging can and will troll you. It also means that once she's used it, don't even bother auto-attacking. There's no reason to stop moving to try and do that, because you cannot get damage through. Nilah can share this with friends if she touches them, which means that if you see the friend get all watery as well, they have the same protection that Nilah does, but it's for a significantly less of a duration. In this regard, you can keep firing on Nilah's friends that have this benefit, especially if they're low health, because it's not going to last very long, which means that there's a good potential that it wears off as your auto attack is in mid-flight, and you can get the damage through regardless. Nilah's W also has a decently long cooldown. She'll get it about once per wave at early levels, which means that if you can force it out early in the wave, you can probably force her to step all the way back there, and then you have a window of opportunity to punish her. But if she hasn't used it, you do have to be cognizant of the fact that that is a cooldown that she has the ability to press. Nilah's E is her mobility, and it's very similar to Samira's E pre-nerf. It can target her friends, she can reactivate her Q during the dash for a burst of damage afterwards, and it travels a fixed distance. She gets 2 charges of this ability though, so hold off on overcommitting to a play on Nilah until she's burned both charges. It is targeted as well, which means that if Nilah has no friends or enemies nearby, she has no mobility, which is a big deal for a champion like this who's very squishy, who's reliant on this mobility to keep herself alive. It's targeted. If she can't get close enough to you to dash to you, if she can't get close enough to an ally to dash to them, she does not have mobility, and that's a huge punish, even if she's got both charges still in the tank. Nilah can dash in for damage and then sit on a charge of this to get away with afterwards by dashing to a minion, for example, though. So it doesn't mean she's committing to a fight if she just dashes to you or to one of your nearby friends. It just means that she's potentially looking for a trade play. If you back away from her wave, then you force Nilah to decide if she wants to commit fully to the play or dash back to the wave and sort of say, yeah, I was just taking a small trade there. But if she does dash in, then she's out of mobility, and at that point, if you think you can turn it, you can try it, because she no longer has her get out of jail free card. Nilah's R, finally, is a very powerful ability, as befits an ultimate, but without an initiator to set her up, she has very little ability to actually get in to use this. As already mentioned, her dashes are both targeted. There's a bit of a weird, funky, like, cast time on her E, which means that you can kind of see the dash in coming, and even though she can both dash and flash while in her ultimate windup, obviously you can see her charging up her ultimate from way outside of range and just start backing away, because you probably don't want to get pulled in from that. As a result of Nilah's R having a very long sort of set up time, and because Nilah doesn't have an initiator setting her up, it's really easy to just get away from this ability, which means that if she is getting value, it's because her initiator already got value with their own ultimate or by helping to set up the play for Nilah, which means that generally, you're not going to be worried about this, except as sort of a secondary follow-up, right? The Malphite goes in, and then Orianna presses Shockwave. It's similar in nature to that, right? Malphite presses Shockwave, Nilah dashes in with Apotheosis right afterwards. This ability does have some defensive value thanks to the heal attached to it, which means that if Nilah starts spinning, either get out of the AoE or finish her off before the ability lands, because she will get a pretty decent chunk of healing off of this ability. This is where your Grievous Wounds may come into play. If you have Ignite, definitely slap it on her when she starts the spin, because it's really going to limit her ability to heal herself. Remember that the heal also applies to nearby allies too, which means that you really want to avoid clumping up against Nilah compositions, so you can make it harder for Nilah to actually get value off of this ability. As a result, therefore, Nilah is sort of an interesting champion. There are a lot of things that I think she does very well. I think she has a very potentially strong all-in lane if she has a champion that's capable of setting her up, which it's not as easy as it sounds, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But generally, Nilah has a very powerful way of setting up plays in her own lane, because she can dash around and do some funny things. She does have a very powerful team fight because of her ultimate, plus her just like AoE DPS, which is very scary. But Nilah is also a very team-dependent character. If she doesn't have an initiator to actually set her up and give her the opportunity to go into a fight, she actually is less useful than a regular marksman, because unlike regular marksman, Nilah has to fully commit to a fight. Nilah can't kind of stay on the outskirts throwing skill shots or maybe auto-attacking the person who's nearest to her. If she's auto-attacking the person nearest to her, she's in the fight. There's no way around it. And as a result, therefore, a Nilah who doesn't have a team that's capable of setting her up isn't going to do very much, or will have to try and force things on her own. And because of this, playing Disengage is so powerful into Nilah compositions. For example, imagine a Hecarim trying to charge into the middle of your team who gets tornadoed. Well, the Hecarim doesn't get to start the fight, and so the Nilah doesn't get to do anything, and then she just kind of stands around being a useless melee champion that can't actually accomplish anything in that particular engagement. If her team doesn't give her any initiation, it's really easy to deal with Nilah. You can keep her at arm's length by playing ranged champions, which, surprise, if you're in the bot lane dealing with Nilah, you're probably playing a ranged champion. And this is one of the biggest advantages that you have against Nilah in lane, is that she is a melee champion in a lane dominated by ranged champions, which means as a result, it can be very difficult for her to get CS or otherwise compete with her opponents. As long as you're saving your defensive cooldowns for if Nilah tries to start a play, you can definitely shut her down almost every single time. Nilah's also, her kit rewards her for being paired with an enchanter who can heal or shield her, because then she gives the heals and shields back, but it also means that she doesn't have a tank, therefore, that can actually set her up for plays, but the tanks don't have the heals and shields necessary to actually support Nilah. So it's sort of this interesting trade-off. I think there are some tank champions that work very well with her, so if you do see a Nilah early in your draft, banning things out like Rakan, for example, who's a really good pick with Nilah, I think is a really good way of addressing the champion early by shutting down one of the best engaged champions that she can be paired with. Finally, talking about counter picks here. I do hate to bring her up again. People who have seen this series for a long time already know, but Poppy is an excellent counter into Nilah. Steadfast Presence is going to block Nilah's dashes in both the offensive and defensive cases. She can tackle Nilah away from her team to prevent big apotheosis plays, or she can simply ult the Nilah or the Nilah's initiator out of the fight. If she ults the Hecarim away from my previous example, then Nilah can't kind of dash in on her own. She needs that front line soaking aggro and doing damage in order for her to actually get value off of apotheosis. If she tries to do it after the Hecarim's already left, well, she just gets focused and dies because she's a squishy crit builder, and she's never going to survive all of that. Conversely, Poppy can ult the Nilah, and then Nilah's not there, and you can win the fight off of that easily. Poppy's just a great champion, you guys. If you're not playing her, you should be. Fundamentally, but she also works against Nilah. Lane bullies like Caitlyn or Draven are also excellent choices into Nilah. Yes, their auto attacks can be blocked by Nilah W, but it's a fairly long cooldown, and it won't stop Draven from just one-off auto attacking her, right? Like, if Draven throws a single auto attack for a good chunk of damage, but does Nilah really use her 25-second cooldown on one auto attack? Probably not, which means that you can slowly chip away at her health bar. It's a similar thing with Caitlyn. Yeah, she might riposte the headshot, but she can't riposte all of the other auto attacks that you're throwing at her. Caitlyn's also got really good wave clear to just shove Nilah in, and even though Nilah's got a decent amount of wave clear back thanks to her AoE auto attacks, you can keep her trapped under her own tower, unable to actually make anything happen in lane, and then she just sort of scales and does nothing because she didn't actually get ahead in lane. Disengage supports, I already talked about disengage, but disengage supports are pretty good picks into Nilah. If she tries to go for a big play like Samira does, she can get stuffed pretty effectively by a Janet Tornado or a Lulu Whimsy or a lot of these other powerful enchanter abilities. You can just kind of say, no thank you, I actually don't want you to make this play. Conversely, you can also pick something like an Alistar if you want to try to go for a kill onto Nilah. That's a little bit harder because she can dash to friends with her dashes, which means that her support can back off towards the tower and Nilah can then dash to the friend in order to get to safety, so it's a little bit harder trying to engage onto her, but certainly Headbutt is a pretty reliable way of saying, no thank you, actually get out of here, I don't want you here. Mages are generally going to outrange Nilah as well, and hilariously, Mage bot lane is actually very potent into Nilah because of how her W works. It reduces the magic damage she takes, yes, but the primary value is by completely ignoring the damage she takes from auto attacks. If you play something like a Ziggs bot lane, or even something cheesy like a Cassiopeia bot lane for Miasma to ground the Nilah so she can't even dash, then she just sort of loses a lot of value off of that because all of a sudden her defensive cooldown isn't actually that defensive, and you can really punish her from there. But this also goes for mid lane as well, being able to just throw skill shots at her from outside of her range and really limit her ability to do much of anything. Anyways, those are going to be my tips for helping to deal with Nilah in your games, guys, but you'll have to let me know what you think of this down in the comments section below, or if you have any other tips and tricks that you've learned for dealing with Nilah, let me know all that down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I'll do it every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.